The late August sun hung heavy over the Montana high plains, turning the air thick and golden, the kind of heat that made cotton stick to skin and common sense melt away. Emily Harper, 26, city-raised, freshly divorced, and desperate for a reset, had answered an ad for a summer ranch hand at the Double Bar L. She told herself it was about healing, about hard work and wide skies, but mostly it was about running from the memory of her ex's smug face when he said she was too uptight to ever really let go. So here she was, 3 weeks in, sunburned, sore, and still trying to prove something to nobody but herself. The ranch belonged to Caleb McLeod, 42, widowed 5 years, built like the mountains he worked under. 6'5", shoulders that strained every flannel shirt he owned, forearms roped with muscle and old scars, and a voice like gravel rolling slow downhill. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. Emily had spent the last 21 days pretending she wasn't listening too hard, pretending the way his jeans hugged his thighs when he swung off his horse didn't make her stomach flip, pretending she didn't catch him watching her bend over to lift feed sacks with the same quiet intensity he watched a storm roll in. Today the hay crew had called out sick, some rodeo in Billings. That left just the two of them to wrestle a busted baler back into the barn before the afternoon thunderheads broke. Emily was already sweating through her tank top, strands of auburn hair plastered to her neck, when Caleb finally muscled the machine through the doors and let it crash onto the concrete floor. Dust swirled in the slanted light. The barn smelled of sweet timothy, warm leather, and something darker, horse, man, raw heat. "Need a breather before we tear into that mess," he said, voice low, wiping his brow with the back of one thick wrist. He nodded toward the old tack room at the far end. "Got something cold in the fridge back there." Emily followed because refusing felt harder than walking. The tack room was cooler, dim, the only light coming through a high-slit window. Bridles hung on the walls like dark vines. A worn leather couch sat against the far wall, and on it, half hidden under a horse blanket, was the biggest saddle she'd ever seen. Not a riding saddle, something custom, almost throne-like, the seat wide and deep, the cantle high and flared. She stared, confused. Caleb cracked 2 beers from a mini fridge, handed her one, and took a long pull from his own. His throat worked, her eyes followed the motion longer than they should have. He noticed. He always noticed. "You ever break a horse that didn't want breaking?" he asked out of nowhere. She laughed nervously. "I've never even been on a horse without a lead rope. Some things look impossible till you just commit," he said. Then the sighs stopped mattering. His gaze flicked to that monstrous saddle and back to her. Something electric snapped in the air between them. Emily's pulse kicked. She tried to joke. "That thing looks like it was built for Paul Bunyan." Caleb's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Built for something that needs a lot of room." He took one step closer, big enough that the space shrank fast. "Ever wonder why I never hired a woman before you, Em?" She swallowed. "Because we're trouble. Because most women take one look at me and run." His voice dropped. "You haven't run yet." Heat flooded her cheeks, her chest, lower. She opened her mouth to say something smart, but nothing came. He reached past her, lifted the horse blanket off the saddle, and let it fall to the floor. Underneath, the seat wasn't empty. Strapped securely into the saddle's wide, contoured center was the biggest dildo she had ever seen in her life, thick as her wrist at the base, ridged and flared, made of matte black silicone that gleamed faintly with a recent coating of lube. It rose proud and obscene from the leather like it belonged there. Emily's breath stopped. Her beer bottle slipped in her sweaty hand. Caleb watched her face, calm as winter dawn. "Too big?" he asked softly. She couldn't speak. Her eyes were locked on it, 10 inches, maybe 11, impossibly thick, the head bulbous and slick. Her thighs pressed together without permission. He took the beer from her limp fingers, set both bottles aside. "City girls always think they know their limits," he murmured, stepping behind her. His chest brushed her back, she felt the heat rolling off him. Then they get out here, feel something real, and realize limits are just stories they tell themselves. His hand settled on her hips, thumbs tracing the waistband of her jeans. Not grabbing, just resting, claiming. "I'm gonna sit right there," he said, nodding toward the old wooden chair beside the saddle rack. "And you're gonna decide if you trust me enough to sit down on what's waiting for you." Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. This was insane. This was pornography brought to life, in a barn that smelled like sex and summer. She should laugh, slap him, run. Instead her nipples tightened painfully against her bra and her pussy gave one helpless clench. "Take your time," he said, voice steady, and stepped back to lower himself into the chair. He spread his thighs wide, jeans pulling tight across a bulge that suddenly made everything terrifyingly clear. He wasn't joking. That monster was scaled to him. He was offering her the ride of her life on a replica of what he carried between his legs every single day. The silence stretched. Outside, thunder rumbled closer. Emily's hands moved without her brain's permission. She toed off her boots, unbuttoned her jeans, let them drop along with her soaked panties. The air kissed her bare skin, she was dripping already, thighs slick. She peeled her tank top over her head, unhooked her bra, let everything fall. Naked in the dim light, goosebumps racing over her skin, she faced him. Caleb's eyes went dark, approving. He didn't move, didn't stroke the straining ridge in his jeans. He just watched her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. She stepped forward until her knees bumped the saddle. The dildo loomed, glistening. She reached out, wrapped her fingers around it, couldn't close them. A helpless sound escaped her throat. "Too big?" he asked again, softer. She met his eyes. "We'll find out." His slow grin was pure sin. "Atta girl." Emily climbed up, one knee on the wide seat, then the other. The saddle was warm from the day's heat. She positioned herself over the head, thighs shaking. The tip nudged her entrance, slick and blunt. She sank an inch and gasped, the stretch burned already. Caleb leaned forward just enough to speak against her ear. "Breathe, Em. Open for it. You were made for more than you think." She bore down. Another inch forced its way inside, spreading her impossibly wide. The pain twisted into something brighter, something that made her moan out loud. She sank further, further, until her ass finally met the leather seat and every inch of that monstrous cock was buried inside her. Her vision whited out for a second. She was impossibly full, impaled, owned. "Fuck," she whimpered. Caleb's big hand settled on her hips again, steadying her. "Look at you," he said, reverent. "Took every goddamn bit like you were born for it." She couldn't answer, she could only rock, testing the stretch, feeling it drag against places inside her she didn't know existed. Her clit throbbed against the seam of the saddle. She started to move, slow circles at first, then harder, chasing friction. The barn echoed with wet sounds, her broken breathing, the creak of leather. Caleb watched, chest heaving, until he couldn't anymore. He stood, unbuckled his belt with one hand, and freed himself. Emily's eyes widened all over again, the real thing was even bigger, flushed dark and heavy in his fist. He stepped close, lined up with her mouth without asking, she opened eagerly, tasting salt and men as he fed himself between her lips while she rode the silicone twin buried in her pussy. Minutes blurred. She lost track of how many times she came, each orgasm sharper than the last, her body shaking apart and stitching itself back together around impossible fullness. Caleb never rushed her, just let her use the saddle, use him, until tears and sweat blurred her vision and her voice was hoarse from screaming his name. When the storm finally broke overhead, rain hammering the tin roof like gunfire, he pulled out of her mouth, lifted her trembling body off the saddle with ridiculous ease, and bent her over a hay bale. The real thing slid home in one long, claiming thrust, no resistance left, just wet, welcoming heat. He fucked her like the world was ending, growling filthy praise against her spine until she came again so hard she saw stars. After, he wrapped her in the horse blanket, carried her to the couch, and held her while the storm raged. She was ruined in the best possible way, marked inside and out, already sore and already craving more. Emily pressed her face to his sweat-damp chest and laughed, shaky and stunned. "You could have warned me." Caleb kissed her temple, voice rough with satisfaction. "And missed the look on your face when you realized you could take it?" "Never." She shivered, deliciously wrecked, and knew one summer wouldn't be enough. If that left you breathless, weak in the knees, and desperately hitting replay, do not miss what happens when Emily decides one ride wasn't nearly enough, and Caleb introduces her to the real thing out under the stars with nothing but rope and moonlight. Hit that subscribe button right now and ring the bell, because the next chapter drops in 48 hours, and trust me, you will not survive missing it. Like, comment your favorite part, and I'll see you filthy darlings in the next one.